The snow had started falling 3 days before Christmas Eve, soft and silent, blanketing our small town in a white quietness that made everything feel suspended in time. I remember standing at the kitchen window, watching the flakes drift down to the amber glow of the streetlights, each one catching a light for just a moment before disappearing into the growing drift below. The glass was cold against my forehead, and I could feel the chill seeping through, making me pull my sweater tighter around my shoulders. Behind me, the kitchen was warm, filled with the rich scent of cinnamon and brown sugar from the cookies Mom had been baking all afternoon. The oven ticked as it cooled, and somewhere in the house, I could hear the faint sound of Christmas carols playing on the old radio in the living room. I was 17 that year, caught in that strange space between childhood and whatever came next, where Christmas still held magic but felt different somehow, like looking at something familiar through a window that had fogged up just enough to blur the edges. My little brother Tommy was 8, and for him, Christmas was still pure wonder, still that breathless anticipation that made the days before the holidays stretch out like taffy, each hour feeling like it would never end. Tommy had been acting strange for weeks. Not bad strange, just quiet in a way that wasn't like him. Usually he was a whirlwind of energy, always running, always talking, always asking questions that started with why and never seemed to have answers that satisfied him. But lately, he had been spending more time in his room, sitting by his window, staring out at the street with an expression I couldn't quite read. When Mom asked him what he wanted for Christmas, he would just shrug and say he was still thinking about it, which was completely unlike him. Last year, he had presented her with a list so long it had to be written on both sides of the paper, complete with drawings and detailed descriptions of each item. I turned away from the window and walked through the kitchen, my socks making soft shuffling sounds on the worn linoleum floor. The house smelled like Christmas. That particular combination of pine from the tree in the living room, the spices from Mom's baking, and something else, something harder to name, maybe just the smell of winter itself, cold and clean and full of possibility. I could hear Dad in the basement, the sound of his tools as he worked on something, probably the old sled he had promised to fix for Tommy. The furnace kicked on with a low rumble, and warm air began flowing through the vents, carrying with it the scent of dust and heat. Tommy's door was closed, which was unusual. He usually left it open, as if closing it would mean missing something important happening in the rest of the house. I knocked softly, 3 gentle taps that barely made a sound against the hollow wood. For a moment, there was nothing, just silence, and then I heard his voice, small and muffled, telling me to come in. He was sitting on his bed, cross-legged, with a notebook open in his lap. The room was dim, lit only by the small lamp on his nightstand, which cast a warm yellow glow that made shadows dance on the walls. His collection of toy cars was lined up on the shelf above his bed, each one perfectly placed, and his posters of astronauts and planets covered the walls, dreams of space and adventure that he talked about constantly. The window was open just a crack, and I could feel the cold air slipping in, making the curtains move slightly, a gentle breathing motion that seemed almost alive. I sat down on the edge of his bed, feeling the mattress dip under my weight, and the old springs creaked in that familiar way that every bed in our house seemed to creak. Tommy looked up at me, and in the lamplight his eyes seemed bigger than usual, darker, filled with something I couldn't quite identify. He closed the notebook quickly, but not before I caught a glimpse of his handwriting, careful and deliberate, covering the page in neat rows. "What are you writing?" I asked him, keeping my voice soft, not wanting to push too hard. He had always been an open book, sharing everything with an enthusiasm that was infectious, but something about the way he held that notebook told me this was different. This was something he was keeping close. He looked down at the notebook, running his fingers over the cover, which was decorated with stickers of stars and rockets that he had carefully placed there over the months. "Just stuff," he said, but his voice had that quality that told me it was more than just stuff. It was something important, something that mattered in a way that 8-year-old things matter, which is to say completely and absolutely. The wind picked up outside, and I could hear it whistling through the crack in the window, a high, lonely sound that made the room feel even cozier by contrast. Downstairs, Mom was humming along to the radio, her voice carrying up to the old house in a way that felt like warmth itself, like sound could be a blanket. The smell of cookies was stronger now, and I knew she must have started another batch, probably the chocolate chip ones that Tommy loved, the ones she made with extra chips because he always complained there weren't enough. Tommy shifted on the bed, pulling his knees up to his chest and wrapping his arms around them. He looked smaller like that, younger, and I was reminded suddenly of how he used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms when he was little, seeking comfort in the presence of someone bigger, someone who could make the scary things seem less scary just by being there. I wanted to reach out and ruffle his hair the way I used to, but something stopped me. Some sense that he needed space right now, needed to find his own way to whatever he was trying to say. You know you can tell me anything, right? I said finally, breaking the silence that had settled between us like snow accumulating on a roof, quiet but growing heavier with each passing moment. He nodded, but didn't look up, just kept staring at that notebook as if it held secrets too big for words. The minutes stretched out, marked only by the ticking of the clock on his wall, a steady rhythm that seemed louder in the quiet. I could hear Dad coming up from the basement now, his footsteps heavy on the stairs, and then the sound of him talking to Mom in the kitchen. Their voices a low murmur that spoke of comfort and routine and all the things that made a house feel like home. The radiator in Tommy's room clanked and hissed as hot water rushed through it, and the smell of old paint and dust mixed with the fresher scent of the pine tree downstairs. Finally, Tommy took a deep breath, the kind that fills your whole chest and makes your shoulders rise, and he opened the notebook again. "Can I ask you something?" he said, and his voice was so serious, so unlike his usual animated chatter, that I felt something tighten in my chest, a kind of anticipation mixed with concern. "Of course," I told him, shifting closer on the bed so that our shoulders were almost touching. The lamp flickered slightly, a brief dimming that made the shadows jump before settling back into their gentle dance. "Do you think Christmas wishes really come true?" he asked, and the question hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning I didn't yet understand. Not like toys and stuff. He continued quickly, as if he needed to clarify before I could answer. "I mean like real wishes, important ones, the kind that matter." I thought about how to answer, weighing the truth against the magic, not wanting to crush whatever hope he was holding on to, but also not wanting to lie to him. The wind rattled the windows slightly, and somewhere down the street, I could hear children laughing, their voices bright and clear in the cold air, probably having a snowball fight or building a snowman in someone's front yard. "I think," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, "that Christmas has a way of making special things happen. Not magic exactly, but something close to it. When people care about each other and really want good things for each other, sometimes those wishes find a way to come true." He considered this, his brow furrowed in concentration, and I could see him working through my words, testing them against whatever he was thinking, whatever wish he was holding so carefully in his heart. The notebook pages rustled as he turned them, and I caught glimpses of his writing, words and sentences that seemed to go on for pages, more than I had ever seen him write for any school assignment. "What if it's something really big?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper now, as if speaking too loudly might break whatever fragile hope he was building. "What if it's something that seems impossible?" The question settled over us like the snow outside, soft but insistent, and I realized that whatever Tommy was wishing for, it wasn't a toy or a game or any of the things that usually filled his Christmas lists. This was something else entirely, something that had been weighing on him for weeks, keeping him quiet and thoughtful in a way that wasn't natural for his usually exuberant spirit. "Tell me what you're wishing for," I said gently, reaching out to put my hand on his shoulder. I could feel the warmth of him through his shirt, the slight trembling that told me he was nervous, scared maybe of saying whatever was out loud. He looked up at me then, and in his eyes I saw something that made my heart ache, a mixture of hope and fear and love so pure it was almost painful to witness. "It's about Mrs. Chun," he said finally, and the name hit me like a physical thing, bringing with a rush of understanding and sorrow. Mrs. Chun lived 3 houses down from us, in the blue house with the white shutters and the garden that in summer was always full of flowers. She was 72 years old, a tiny woman with silver hair. She wore in a neat bun and a smile that could light up an entire room. She had lived on our street for as long as I could remember, and she had been like a grandmother to all the kids in the neighborhood, always ready with cookies and stories and a gentle word when someone needed it. Tommy had been especially close to her, spending hours in her garden, helping her plant flowers and pull weeds, listening to her stories about growing up in another country. In another time, stories that seemed to fascinate him endlessly. But Mrs. Chun was sick. She had been sick for months now. The kind of sick that everyone knew wasn't going to get better. The kind that made people speak in hushed voices and look away when her name came up. I had seen the ambulance at her house twice in the past month, had watched her daughter arrive from the city, her face drawn and tired, carrying the weight of watching someone you love slowly fade away. Tommy's eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them back, determined not to cry, and I felt my own throat tighten in response. "She's really sick," he said, his voice cracking slightly on the words. "I heard Mom and Dad talking about it. They said she might not make it to the new year." The radiator hissed again, and the warm air it pushed out seemed at odds with the cold feeling that had settled in my chest. Downstairs, the radio had switched to a different song, something slow and instrumental, and I could hear Mom moving around the kitchen, the clink of dishes and the sound of water running in the sink. "I've been visiting her," Tommy continued, the words coming faster now, as if once he started, he couldn't stop. "Every day after school, I go to her house, and her daughter lets me in and I sit with her. She's so tired all the time now, and she can't get out of bed much, but she still smiles when she sees me. She tells me stories, but sometimes she falls asleep in the middle of them, and I just sit there and hold her hand because I don't want her to be alone." The image of my little brother, sitting beside Mrs. Chen's bed, holding her frail hand in his small one, was almost too much to bear. I had known he was visiting her, had seen him walking down the street toward her house with that serious expression on his face, but I hadn't realized how often he went, hadn't understood the depth of what he was doing. "She told me last week," Tommy said, his voice dropping to barely a whisper, "that she's not scared of dying, but she's sad because she's going to miss Christmas. She said Christmas was always her favorite time of year, and she's sad that this will be her last one, and she won't get to see the snow or the lights or any of it, because she's too sick to even look out the window anymore." A tear escaped down Tommy's cheek, tracing a path that caught the lamplight, and he wiped away quickly with the back of his hand. "So that's my wish," he said, looking at me with those big eyes that held so much hope it was almost unbearable. "I want to give Mrs. Chun one more real Christmas. Not just a day, but the feeling of it, all the magic and wonder and joy. I want her to feel like Christmas came to her, even though she can't go to it." The weight of his wish settled over me, and I understood now why he'd been so quiet, so thoughtful. This wasn't a child's simple wish for a toy or a game. This was something profound, something that spoke to a kind of love and compassion that seemed too big for an 8-year-old boy, and yet here it was real and urgent and desperately important. "I don't know how to do it," Tommy said, his voice breaking completely now, the tears flowing freely. "I've been trying to think of something, anything, but I'm just a kid. I don't have money to buy her presents or decorations or anything special. All I have is this wish, and I don't even know if wishes work like that, if you can wish for something for someone else instead of for yourself." I pulled him close then, wrapping my arms around him as he cried into my shoulder, his small body shaking with the force of his emotions. The notebook fell from his lap onto bed, and I could see now that the pages were filled with ideas, lists of things he thought might make Mrs. Chin happy, drawings of Christmas trees and stars and angels, all the things he associated with the holiday, all the things he wanted to give her but didn't know how. The house seemed to hold its breath around us, the sound of Mom in the kitchen fading into the background, the wind outside quieting as if the world itself was listening to this moment, to this pure expression of love from a child who understood something that many adults never learn, that the best gifts are the ones we get others, especially when those others need them most. I held Tommy until his crying subsided into quiet sniffles, and then I pulled back just enough to look at him, to see his face red and blotchy from tears, but also determined, still holding on to that hope despite everything. "Listen to me," I said, keeping my voice steady even though my own emotions were threatening to overwhelm me. "This is the most beautiful wish I've ever heard, and we're going to make it happen. I don't know exactly how yet, but we're going to give Mrs. Chun the most magical Christmas she's ever had." His eyes widened, hope flaring bright and immediate. "Really?" he asked, his voice small and uncertain. "You think we can?" "I think we have to. I told him, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. But we're going to need help. We can't do this alone. The next hour passed in a blur of whispered planning. We went downstairs together, and I asked Mom and Dad if we could talk to them about something important. They must have seen something in our faces, some seriousness that demanded attention, because Dad turned off the radio and Mom sat down at the kitchen table, giving us her full attention. The kitchen was warm and bright, the overhead light casting a yellow glow over everything, and the smell of cookies was almost overwhelming now, sweet and comforting. Tommy told them everything, his words tumbling out in a rush, and I watched as understanding and then emotion washed over their faces. Mom's eyes filled with tears, and Dad cleared his throat several times. That thing he did when he was trying not to cry. When Tommy finished, there was a moment of silence, and then Mom reached across the table and took his hand in hers. "That's the most wonderful wish I've ever heard," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And your father and I are going to help you make it come true." Dad nodded, and I could see him already thinking, already planning. "We'll need to talk to her daughter first," he said. "Make sure it's okay. Make sure we're not going to cause any problems or make things harder for Mrs. Chun. But if we get the green light, we're going to make this happen." The next day was December 22nd, just 2 days before Christmas Eve, and the town was alive with holiday energy. The snow had continued to fall through the night, and everything was covered in a thick white blanket that made the world look clean and new and full of possibility. Dad called Mrs. Chen's daughter, Linda, early in the morning, and they talked for a long time. I could hear his voice from upstairs, serious and gentle, explaining what Tommy wanted to do, asking for permission, for guidance, for any information that might help us make this wish come true. When he hung up, he came upstairs to where Tommy and I were waiting in the hallway, and the smile on his face told us everything we needed to know before he even spoke. She said yes, he told us, and his voice was rough with emotion. She said her mother has been so sad, so tired, and the thought of bringing Christmas to her, of giving her that joy one more time, it made Linda cry. She wants to help however she can. What happened next was something I will remember for the rest of my life, a testament to the power of community and love, and the magic that happens when people come together for something bigger than themselves. Dad made a few phone calls, and within an hour, our living room was filled with neighbors. The Johnsons from next door, the Martinez family from across the street, old Mr. Peterson who lived alone at the end of the block, the young couple who had just moved in last spring, families with children, and elderly folks who remembered Mrs. Chun from years of neighborhood gatherings and summer barbecues. Mom had made coffee, and the smell of it mixed with the pine scent from our tree, and everyone was talking at once, voices overlapping in excitement and determination. Tommy stood in the middle of it all, looking overwhelmed but happy, and I stayed close to him, my hand on his shoulder, anchoring him in the midst of all this sudden activity. Dad explained the situation, told him about Tommy's wish, and I watched his faces soften, as eyes grew bright with tears, as people nodded and began offering ideas, resources, time, whatever they could give to make this happen. Mrs. Martinez said she had extra Christmas lights in her garage, strings and strings of them that she had been collecting for years. Mr. Peterson said he had a small artificial tree that he wasn't using, and it was already decorated, ready to go. The Johnsons offered to bake cookies and make hot chocolate, and the young couple said they could bring their portable speaker and play Christmas music. But it was Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who had lived on our street for 40 years, who offered something that made everyone stop and listen. She said she remembered that Mrs. Chun had once told her about Christmases in her childhood, in the small village where she grew up, how they would hang paper lanterns and sing carols in her native language, how the whole village would come together on Christmas Eve and share a meal, everyone bringing something, creating a feast from their combined offerings. Mrs. Patterson said she thought she could remember some of those songs, and maybe if we could find the right decorations, we could recreate a little bit of that memory from Mrs. Chun. Give her not just Christmas, but her Christmas, the one she remembered from when she was young and healthy and full of dreams. The room fell silent for a moment, and then everyone started talking again, but with a new energy, a new purpose. Someone said they knew where to get paper lanterns. Someone else said they could look up traditional songs online. And Mom said she would call Linda and ask about Mrs. Chen's favorite foods, the dishes she grew up with, so we could try to recreate them. The rest of that day and all of the next passed in a flurry of activity. Our house became command central, with people coming and going at all hours, bringing supplies, sharing ideas, coordinating efforts. The kitchen was constantly full of people cooking, trying recipes, adjusting seasonings, creating dishes that smelled exotic and wonderful, filling the house with scents I had never experienced before, spices and herbs that spoke of distant places and different traditions. Tommy was everywhere, helping where he could, watching everything with wide eyes, as if he couldn't quite believe that his wish was actually coming true, that all these people were working together to create something beautiful for someone he loved. I saw him helping Mrs. Martinez untangle strings of lights, carefully separating each strand and testing the bulbs. I saw him in the kitchen with Mom, stirring a pot of something that smelled like ginger and star anise, his face serious with concentration. I saw him sitting with Mrs. Patterson, listening as she hummed old melodies, trying to remember the words to songs she hadn't heard in decades. On the evening of December 23rd, Christmas Eve, we were ready. Linda had told us that the best time would be around 7 in the evening, after Mrs. Chun had rested from her afternoon medications, but before she got too tired for the night. She said her mother had been asking about Tommy, wondering why he hadn't visited in the past 2 days, and Linda had told her he was busy with Christmas preparations, which was true, just not in the way Mrs. Chen probably imagined. The sun was setting as we all gathered outside Mrs. Chen's house, the sky turning shades of pink and orange and purple that reflected off the snow, making everything glow with an otherworldly light. The temperature had dropped, and our breath came out in white clouds, and I could feel the cold seeping through my coat, making me shiver. But there was a warmth among us, a collective energy that seemed to push back against the winter chill. We had transformed Mrs. Chen's living room into something magical. Linda had let us in earlier in the day while Mrs. Chang was sleeping, and we had worked quietly, efficiently, hanging the paper lanterns on the ceiling so they glowed with soft-colored light, setting up the small tree in the corner, its branches heavy with ornaments that caught and reflected the lantern light. We had strung lights around the windows, creating a warm glow that would be visible from her bedroom. We had set up a table with all the food, dishes that Linda had helped us identify as favorites from her mother's childhood, things she hadn't tasted in years, maybe decades. The smell of the food filled the house, rich and complex and deeply comforting. Now, as we stood outside in the cold, Linda came to the door and nodded to us. "She's awake," she said, and her voice was thick with emotion. "She's asking what all the commotion is about. I think it's time." We filed in quietly, respectfully, filling the living room until it was packed with people, all of us standing shoulder to shoulder, our coats still on, bringing with us the smell of cold air and snow. Tommy was at the front, holding my hand so tightly I could feel his pulse through his palm, rapid and nervous. The house was warm, almost too warm after cold outside, and I could feel sweat starting to form on my back under my heavy coat. Linda went to her mother's bedroom, and we could hear her voice, soft and gentle, telling Mrs. Chun that there were some people here to see her, that Tommy had a surprise for her. There was a long pause, and then we heard Mrs. Chen's voice, weak but curious, asking what kind of surprise. And then Linda was wheeling her mother out in a wheelchair, and the sight of Mrs. Chen made my breath catch in my throat. She had always been small, but now she seemed almost impossibly tiny, as if she were disappearing into herself. Her silver hair was thin now, and her skin had a translucent quality that spoke of illness and pain. But her eyes, when she saw all of us standing there, when she saw the decorations and the lights in the tree, her eyes came alive with something that can only be described as pure joy. Tommy let go of my hand and walked over to her, and she reached out with trembling hands to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his cheek. "My sweet boy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What have you done?" "I wanted to give you Christmas," Tommy said, and his voice was steady now, clear and strong. "You said you were going to miss it, and I couldn't let that happen. So I asked everyone to help me bring Christmas to you." Mrs. Chen's eyes filled with tears, and they spilled down her cheeks, and she didn't try to wipe them away, just let them fall as she looked around the room, taking in every detail, every person, every decoration. The paper lantern swayed slightly in the warm air from the heating vents, casting moving shadows on the walls, and the lights on the tree blinked in a slow, steady rhythm that seemed almost like a heartbeat. Then Mrs. Patterson stepped forward, and she began to sing. Her voice was old and wavering, but it carried a melody that was hauntingly beautiful, words in a language I didn't understand, but that seemed to carry meaning beyond words, something primal and deep and connected to memory and home and all the things that make us who we are. One by one, others joined in, some knowing the words, others just humming along, and the sound filled the room, filled the house, seemed to fill the entire world. Mrs. Chin closed her eyes, and more tears streamed down her face. But she was smiling so wide it seemed impossible that so much joy could fit in such a frail body. She began to sing too, her voice thin and breathy but joining with the others, and I realized she was singing in her native language, words from her childhood, from a time before illness and age, from a time when Christmas was new and magical and full of endless possibility. The song ended, and for a moment there was only silence, a silence so complete it felt sacred, as if we were all standing in a church or a temple or some other holy place. Then Mrs. Chin opened her eyes and looked at Tommy, and she said, "Come here, my dear boy." He went to her, and she took his hands in hers, holding them with a strength that seemed impossible given how frail she looked. "You have given me the greatest gift," she said, her voice stronger now, as if the singing had restored something in her. Not just Christmas, but a reminder that love is real, that kindness exists, that even in the darkest times there is light. You have reminded me why life is worth living, why every moment matters, why we must hold on to hope even when hope seems foolish. She looked around at all of us then, her gaze moving from face to face, and I felt seen in a way I had never felt before, as if she was looking not just at me, but into me, seeing something essential and true. "All of you," she said, her voice carrying despite its weakness. "You have shown me the true meaning of Christmas, the real magic that has nothing to do with presents or decorations or any of the things we think are important. You have shown me that Christmas is about community, about coming together, about caring for each other in the ways that matter most." Then Mom and Mrs. Martinez brought out the food, plate after plate of dishes that steamed and smelled incredible, and we all ate together, crowded into that small living room, sitting on the floor and on chairs and on the arms of couch, balancing plates on our laps and passing dishes back and forth. Mrs. Chin couldn't eat much, just a few bites of this and that, but she tasted everything, and with each bite, she would close her eyes and smile, as if each flavor was transporting her back through time to memories we couldn't see, but could feel in the way her face softened, in the way her shoulders relaxed. People told stories, shared memories of Mrs. Chin over the years, funny moments and touching moments, and all the small ways she had impacted their lives. Mr. Peterson talked about how she had brought him soup every week for a month after his wife died, never making a big deal of it, just showing up with a container of something warm and homemade, and sitting with him while he ate, keeping him company in his grief. Mrs. Martinez talked about how Mrs. Chun had helped her learn English when she first moved to the neighborhood, patient and kind, and never making her feel stupid for her mistakes. The young couple talked about how Mrs. Chun had welcomed them to the street, bringing them a plan for their new home, and telling them about the neighborhood, making them feel like they belonged. Each story added another layer to the evening, another thread in the tapestry of love and community that we were weaving together. Tommy sat at Mrs. Chen's feet, his head resting against her knee, and she kept one hand on his head, her fingers gently stroking his hair, and I could see that he was exactly where he wanted to be, that this moment was everything he had hoped for and more. As the evening wore on, Mrs. Chen began to tire. We could see in the way her eyes started to droop, in the way her hand on Tommy's head grew heavier, less deliberate. Linda noticed too, and she gently suggested that maybe it was time for her mother to rest. But Mrs. Chin shook her head, a small but determined movement. "Not yet," she said. "There's one more thing I need to say." The room quieted again, everyone turning their attention to her, and she took a deep breath, gathering her strength for what she wanted to express. "I have lived a long life," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I have seen many things, experienced joy and sorrow, love and loss. I have traveled far from where I began, and I have made a home in a place that was once foreign to me. And through it all, through every challenge and every triumph, I have learned that the only thing that truly matters is the connections we make with each other, the love we share, the kindness we show." She paused, and I could see the effort it took for her to continue. But she was determined, driven by something deeper than physical strength. "Tonight, You have given me a gift beyond measure. You have shown me that my life has mattered, that the small kindnesses I tried to show, the connections I tried to make, they were not in vain. You have shown me that I am loved, and that is the greatest gift anyone can receive. Her eyes found Tommy's, and she smiled down at him with such tenderness it made my chest ache. And you, my sweet boy, you have taught me something I thought I already knew but needed to be reminded of. You have taught me that children see the world more clearly than adults, that they understand what is truly important, that they have not yet learned to complicate love with conditions and expectations. You wish for my happiness, not for your own gain, and that is the purest form of love there is. Tommy's eyes were shining with tears, but he was smiling too, and I could see that he understood, in whatever way an 8-year-old can understand, that he had done something important, something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Mrs. Chen looked around the room one more time, her gaze lingering on each face, as if she was memorizing us, storing us away in whatever place memories go when the body begins to fail. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for this perfect Christmas, for this reminder that even at the end there is beauty, there is love, there is magic." Linda wheeled her mother back to the bedroom then, and we all began to quietly gather our things, putting on our coats, collecting empty dishes, moving with a reverence that felt appropriate for what we had just experienced. The house was still warm, still filled with the smell of food and the glow of the lanterns, but something had shifted, some essential thing had been completed, and we all felt it. Outside, the night was clear and cold, the sky full of stars that seemed brighter than usual, as if they too were celebrating what had happened. The snow crunched under our feet as we walked back to our houses, and I could hear the murmur of voices, people talking quietly about the evening, about Mrs. Chun, about the power of what we had just witnessed. Tommy walked between Mom and me, holding both our hands, and he was quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet, a satisfied quiet, the quiet of someone who has accomplished something important and is now processing what it means. When we got home, the house felt different somehow, as if what we had done had changed not just Mrs. Chen's home, but ours as well, had infused it with something intangible but real. That night, after Tommy had gone to bed, I sat in the living room with Mom and Dad, the three of us just sitting in the glow of our own Christmas tree, not talking much, just being together. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the clock and the occasional creak of the old wood settling in the cold. The smell of pine was strong, mixed with the lingering scent of the cookies Mom had baked days ago, and I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a long time, maybe ever. What Tommy did, Mom said finally, breaking the silence, that was something special. That was something most adults never learn to do. Putting someone else's happiness above their own, seeing a need and finding a way to fill it. Dad nodded, his eyes reflecting the colored lights from the tree. "He's going to remember this for the rest of his life," he said. "And so will we. So will everyone who was there tonight." Christmas Eve came, and then Christmas Day, and our family celebrated in our usual way, with presents and a big breakfast and all the traditions we had built over the years. But everything felt different now, colored by what we had done for Mrs. Chun, by the reminder that Christmas was about so much more than the things we usually focused on. Tommy opened his presents with enthusiasm, but I noticed that he kept looking toward Mrs. Chen's house, visible through our front window, as if checking on her, making sure she was okay. On the afternoon of Christmas Day, Linda called. I answered the phone, and I could hear in her voice before she even spoke that something had changed. "She passed away this morning," Linda said, and her voice was sad but also peaceful, accepting. She went quietly in her sleep with a smile on her face. I was with her, holding her hand, and her last words were about the party, about Tommy, about how grateful she was. The news hit me like a physical blow, even though we had all known it was coming, even though Mrs. Chun herself had accepted it. I felt tears spring to my eyes, and I had to take a moment before I could speak. "I'm so sorry," I managed to say, the words feeling inadequate for the magnitude of the loss. "Don't be sorry," Linda said, and I could hear that she was crying too, but there was something else in her voice, something like gratitude. "What you all did, what Tommy did, it gave my mother peace. She died happy, surrounded by love, with the memory of that perfect Christmas fresh in her mind. That's all any of us can hope for, really. You gave her that gift, and I will be grateful for it for the rest of my life. After I hung up, I had to tell my family, and that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Mom cried, and Dad's eyes got red and watery, and Tommy just sat very still for a long time, processing information in whatever way children process death, that incomprehensible finality that seems impossible when you're young and the world still feels eternal. Finally, he looked up at me, and he asked, "Did my wish come true?" The question hung in the air, and I thought about how to answer, about what truth to tell. "Yes," I said, kneeling down so I was at his eye level. "Your wish came true. You wanted to give Mrs. Chen one more real Christmas, and you did. You gave her joy and love and magic, and she died happy because of what you did. That's what wishes are supposed to do, Tommy. They're supposed to make things better, even if they can't make everything perfect." He thought about this, his brow furrowed in that serious way he had, and then he nodded slowly. "I'm sad she's gone," he said, his voice small, "but I'm glad you got to have Christmas first." "Me too," I told him, pulling him into a hug. "Me too." The funeral was 3 days later, on a gray afternoon, when the sky was heavy with clouds that threatened more snow, but never quite delivered. The church was packed with people, not just from our neighborhood, but from all over town. People whose lives Mrs. Chun had touched in ways big and small over her 72 years. The service was beautiful, a mixture of traditional hymns and songs in Mrs. Chen's native language, and person after person stood up to share memories, to talk about her kindness, her generosity, her quiet strength. But it was Linda who told the story that mattered most, the story of Tommy's wish and how the neighborhood had come together to make it come true. She spoke about that evening, about the decorations and the food and the singing, about the joy on her mother's face, about the peace it had given her in her final days. She spoke about the power of community, about the importance of showing love while we still can, about the lesson her mother's life and death had taught all of us. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the church, and I felt Tommy's hand slip into mine, his small fingers gripping tight. I looked down at him, and he was crying silently, tears streaming down his face, but he was also standing tall, his shoulders back, as if he understood that grief and pride could exist together, that sadness and satisfaction were not mutually exclusive. After the service, people came up to Tommy, one after another, to thank him, to tell him how special he was, to express their admiration for what he had done. He handled it with a grace that seemed beyond his years, accepting their words with quiet dignity, saying thank you and nodding, and sometimes just standing there, letting them hug him, understanding somehow that they needed this as much as he did. The weeks after the funeral passed slowly, the way time does in the dead of winter when the days are short and the nights are long and everything feels suspended in cold and darkness. The neighborhood felt different without Mrs. Chun, as if a light had gone out, leaving a shadow that we all noticed but didn't quite know how to talk about. Her house stood empty, the blue paint looking faded in the winter light, the garden buried under snow, waiting for a spring that would come, but would find different hands tending it, or maybe no hands at all. Tommy went back to school after the winter break, and slowly he started to seem more like himself again, the energy returning, the constant questions, the enthusiasm for life that was so essentially him. But there was something different too, something deeper, a thoughtfulness that hadn't been there before, as if he had learned something about the world that had changed him in fundamental ways. One evening in late January, when the days were just starting to get a tiny bit longer and the worst of the winter cold had passed, Tommy came into my room while I was doing homework. He stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching me, and then he came in and sat on my bed, the same way he had that night weeks ago when he first told me about his wish. "I've been thinking," he said, and I put down my pencil and turned to give him my full attention, about Mrs. Chun, and about Christmas, and about wishes. I waited, letting him find his words, knowing that whatever he wanted to say was important, at least to him, and therefore important to me. "I think wishes do come true," he said slowly, working through his thoughts as he spoke, "but not the way we usually think they do. It's not magic, not like in fairy tales. It's more like when you wish for something hard enough, and when you're willing to work for it, and when other people help you, then the wish becomes real. Not because of magic, but because of love." I felt something tighten in my chest, a mixture of pride and sadness and love for this little boy who had somehow figured out something that many people spend their whole lives trying to understand. You're right, I told him. That's exactly how wishes work. The magic isn't in the wishing. It's in the doing, in the caring enough to try, in the willingness to ask for help and to give help when it's needed. He nodded, satisfied with his confirmation, and then he said, I miss her. Mrs. Chun. I miss going to her house and listening to her stories and helping in her garden. I miss the way she would smile when she saw me, like I was the best thing that had happened to her all day. I know, I said softly. I miss her too. We all do. But you know what? Tommy, she's not really gone. Not completely. She's in all the memories we have of her, in all the lessons she taught us, in all the ways she made us better people. And she's especially in you, in the kindness you showed her, in the love you gave her. That doesn't go away just because she's not here anymore. He thought about this for a long moment, and then he said something that I have carried with me ever since, something that has shaped how I think about life and death and love and loss. He said, then I guess the best way to keep her alive is to keep being kind, to keep helping people, to keep making wishes for other people instead of just for myself. Yes, I told him, my voice thick with emotion. That's exactly right. That's the best way to honor her memory, to live the way she lived, to love the way she loved. Spring came eventually, the way it always does, with the snow melting and the ground softening and the first green shoots pushing up through the earth, determined and hopeful. Linda put Mrs. Chen's house on the market, and a new family moved in, a couple with 2 young children who ran around the yard with the same energy Tommy had once brought to Mrs. Chen's garden. The neighborhood absorbed them the way neighborhoods do, welcoming them, helping them settle in, creating new connections and new stories. But we didn't forget Mrs. Chun. How could we? When she had taught us so much, when she had shown us what it meant to live a life of kindness and grace. The neighborhood started a tradition that spring, a community garden in the small park at the end of our street, and we dedicated it to Mrs. Chen's memory. Everyone contributed, planting flowers and vegetables, creating a space that was beautiful and useful, a space that brought people together the way Mrs. Chun had always brought people together. Tommy was there every day after school, his hands in the dirt, planting and weeding and watering, and I could see Mrs. Chun in every careful movement he made, in every gentle touch he gave to the growing plants. He had learned from her, not just about gardening, but about life, about the importance of nurturing things, about the patience required to watch something grow, about the satisfaction of creating beauty in the world. Years passed, the way years do, each one bringing changes and challenges and joys. I graduated from high school and went to college, and Tommy grew from a boy into a young man, tall and strong, but still carrying that essential kindness that had defined him since he was 8 years old. He became known in our town as someone who helped people, who saw needs and found ways to fill them, who made wishes for others and then worked to make those wishes come true. He organized food drives and coat collections. He volunteered at the nursing home and the hospital. He spent his summers working at a camp for kids with disabilities, giving them experiences they might not otherwise have had. And every Christmas, without fail, he would find someone who needed something, some person or family who was struggling, and he would rally the neighborhood to help, creating the same kind of magic he had created for Mrs. Chun, proving over and over that wishes could come true when people cared enough to make them happen. I watched him do all this with pride that was almost overwhelming. This little brother who had taught me more about love and compassion than I had ever taught him, who had shown me that age and size and power were not what mattered, that what mattered was the size of your heart and your willingness to use it. Now, all these years later, I am older than my parents were that Christmas when Tommy made his wish. I have children of my own, and I tell them the story of their Uncle Tommy and Mrs. Chun, about the Christmas wish that changed everything, about the power of community and love, and the magic that happens when we put others before ourselves. I tell them about the paper lanterns and the traditional songs, about the food and the stories and the tears of joy on an old woman's face. I tell them about how their uncle, when he was just 8 years old, understood something profound about the nature of Christmas, about the nature of life itself. And every Christmas, our family continues a tradition Tommy started. We find someone who needs help, someone who is struggling or lonely or sad, and we bring Christmas to them. Sometimes it's a family who can't afford presents for their children. Sometimes it's an elderly person in a nursing home who has no visitors. Sometimes it's a single parent working 3 jobs and barely keeping their head above water. Whoever it is, we come together, we pool our resources and our time and our love, and we create magic. Because that's what Tommy taught us, that Christmas isn't about what we get, but about what we give, not just material things, but time and attention and love. He taught us that the best wishes are the ones we make for other people, that the truest magic is the magic we create together. That community is not just a place where we live, but the connections we forge and maintain and nurture. Tommy is a teacher now, working with children who come from difficult backgrounds, kids who have seen too much hardship too young, who need someone to believe in them, to show them that the world can be kind, that people can be good, that there is hope even in the darkest times. He is exactly where he should be, doing exactly what he was meant to do, living out the lesson he learned that Christmas when he was 8 years old and made a wish for someone else. Sometimes when I visit him, I see echoes of Mrs. Chun in the way he interacts with his students, in the patience he shows, in the gentle encouragement he offers, in the way he sees potential in every child, no matter how troubled or difficult they might seem. He has become what she was, a light in the darkness, a source of comfort and hope, a reminder that kindness matters, that love is real, that we are all connected in ways that transcend the boundaries we usually recognize. The community garden we started in Mrs. Chen's memory is still there, thriving and beautiful, tended by generations of neighbors who have learned the lessons she taught, who understand that creating beauty and nurturing growth is not just about plants, but about people, about community, about the world we want to live in. There's a bench there now, with a plaque that reads in memory of Mrs. Chun, who taught us that the best gifts are the ones we give others, and people sit there in summer evenings, watching the sunset, talking quietly, creating the kind of connections that make life worth living. I think about that Christmas often, especially as the years pass and the world seems to grow harder, more divided, more focused on differences than on commonalities. I think about how a simple wish from a child brought an entire neighborhood together, how it reminded us all of what truly matters, how it created a ripple effect that continues to this day, touching lives in ways we probably don't even fully understand. I think about Mrs. Chun, about her grace and her kindness and her quiet strength, about the way she lived her life in service to others, about the legacy she left behind that had nothing to do with money or possessions or any of the things we usually think of as important. Her legacy was love, pure and simple, love given freely and without expectation return, love that transformed everyone it touched. And I think about Tommy, about the boy he was and the man he became, about the wish he made, and the way it changed not just Mrs. Chen's life, but all of our lives, about the lesson he taught us that shaped how we live, how we love, how we move through the world. He showed us that we are never too young or too small or too powerless to make a difference, that the biggest changes often start with the smallest gestures, that magic is real if we're willing to create it. The snow is falling again tonight, soft and silent, just like it was all those years ago when Tommy first told me about his wish. I'm standing at my kitchen window, watching the flakes drift down to the amber glow of the streetlights, and I'm thinking about Christmas, about wishes, about the power of love to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary. My children are in the living room, decorating the tree, their voices bright with excitement, and I can smell cookies baking in the oven, cinnamon and brown sugar, the same recipe my mother used, the same smells that filled our house that long ago December. Tomorrow, we will go as a family to visit a shelter for homeless families, bringing presents and food and spending the day with people who need to know they are not forgotten, that they matter, that someone cares. It's what we do every year, what we will continue to do for as long as we are able, because Tommy taught us that this is what Christmas is really about, this is what life is really about, this connection, this caring, this willingness to see beyond ourselves and our own needs to the needs of others. My youngest daughter, who is 8 years old now, the same age Tommy was when he made his wish, asked me last week what I wanted for Christmas. I told her the same thing I tell her every year, that what I want is for her and her siblings to grow up understanding that the best gifts are the ones we give, that the truest joy comes from making others happy, that we are all responsible for each other in ways both big and small. She thought about this for a moment, her face serious in that way that reminds me so much of Tommy. And then she said, I want to make a wish for someone else this year, like Uncle Tommy did. I want to find someone who needs something and help them get it. And in that moment, I knew that the legacy continues, that the lesson Tommy learned and taught us all those years ago is being passed down to another generation, that the ripple effect of one small boy's wish is still spreading, still touching lives, still creating magic in a world that desperately needs it. Because that's the thing about love, about kindness, about the willingness to put others first. It doesn't end, it doesn't fade, it doesn't diminish with time or distance or even death. It grows, it spreads, it multiplies, touching person after person, life after life, creating a web of connection and caring that holds us all together, that reminds us we are not alone, that shows us the best of what humanity can be. Mrs. Chin has been gone for many years now, but she is not forgotten. She lives on in the garden that bears her name, in the stories we tell about her, in the lessons she taught us about how to live a life of meaning and purpose. She lives on in Tommy, in the work he does, in the lives he touches, in the love he spreads. She lives on in all of us who knew her, who were changed by her, who carry forward the example she set. And Tommy, my little brother who made a wish for someone else when he was just 8 years old. He has become a living embodiment of everything that Christmas is supposed to represent. Not the commercial aspects, not the presents and the decorations and the elaborate meals, but the deeper meaning, the spiritual truth that lies at the heart of the holiday. Love, compassion, generosity, community, hope. These are the things that matter. These are the things that last. These are the things that make life worth living. I have learned so much from him over the years. This brother who was supposed to learn from me, who I was supposed to guide and protect and teach. He taught me that wisdom has nothing to do with age, that courage can come in small packages, that the most profound truths are often the simplest ones. He taught me that we all have the power to create magic, to make wishes come true, to change the world in ways both big and small. We just have to care enough to try, to be willing to put in the work, to ask for help when we need it, to give help when it's asked of us. The Christmas when Tommy made his wish for Mrs. Chun was a turning point, not just for him, but for all of us, for our entire community. It reminded us of who we wanted to be, of the values we wanted to live by, of the kind of world we wanted to create. It showed us that even in the face of loss and sadness and the inevitable march of time, there is beauty, there is joy, there is meaning to be found and created and shared. Every year, as Christmas approaches, I feel a mixture of emotions. There is excitement and anticipation that the holiday always brings, the joy of being with family, the pleasure traditions maintained and memories created. But there's also a deeper feeling, something more profound, a sense of gratitude for the lessons I have learned, for the people who have shaped me, for the experiences that have made me who I am. I am grateful for Mrs. Chun, for her kindness and her grace and the example she set. I am grateful for my parents, who supported Tommy's wish and helped make it come true, who taught us by their actions what it means to be good people. I am grateful for our neighbors, who came together without hesitation, who gave their time and their resources and their love to create something beautiful. And most of all, I am grateful for Tommy, for his pure heart and his generous spirit and his unwavering belief that wishes can come true if we're willing to work for them. The world can be a hard place, full of challenges and disappointments and sorrows that sometimes seem too heavy to bear. But it is also full of beauty and love and moments of grace that remind us why we keep going, why we keep trying, why we keep believing in the possibility of something better. Tommy's wish, and the way our community came together to make it come true, was one of those moments of grace, a reminder that we are capable of extraordinary things when we act from a place of love. I think about the look on Mrs. Chen's face that evening, the joy and the peace and the gratitude that radiated from her despite her frail body and her failing health. I think about how she said we had given her the greatest gift, the reminder that love is real, that kindness exists, that even in the darkest times there is light. And I realize that she gave us a gift too, the gift of allowing us to serve her, to show our love, to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Because that's the secret of giving, the thing that Tommy understood instinctively at 8 years old. When we give to others, when we serve them and love them and work to make their lives better, we are not diminished. We are enlarged. We become more fully ourselves, more fully human, more fully alive. The joy we create for others comes back to us multiplied. not because we expect it or demand it, but because that's simply how love works, how connection works, how the universe itself seems to be structured. Mrs. Chun received the gift of one more magical Christmas, but we received something too. We received the gift of purpose, of meaning, of being part of something that mattered. We received the gift of community, of working together toward a common goal, of seeing what we could accomplish when we pooled our resources and our talents and our love. We received the gift of perspective, of understanding what truly matters in life, of being reminded that time is precious and love is the only thing that lasts. These are not small gifts. These are the gifts that change lives, that shape destinies, that create ripples that spread far beyond what we can see or measure or understand. Tommy's wish changed Mrs. Chen's last days, but it also changed all of us who participated in making that wish come true. It changed how we saw ourselves, how we saw each other, how we saw the world and our place in it. In the years since that Christmas, I have faced my own challenges and sorrows. I have lost people I love. I have struggled with doubts and fears. I have questioned whether life has meaning, whether anything we do really matters in the grand scheme of things. And in those dark moments, I think back to that evening in Mrs. Chen's living room, to the paper lanterns and the traditional songs, to the tears of joy on an old woman's face, to my little brother's hand in mine as we stood together in the midst of something holy. And I remember that, yes, it matters. Every act of kindness matters. Every gesture of love matters. Every moment of connection matters. We may not be able to solve all the world's problems. We may not be able to prevent suffering or stop death or fix everything that is broken, but we can do what Tommy did. We can see someone who is hurting and decide to help. We can make a wish for someone else and then work to make that wish come true. We can bring light into darkness, joy into sorrow, love into loneliness. This is not a small thing. This is everything. This is the whole point of being human, of being alive, of being part of this strange and beautiful and heartbreaking world. We are here to love each other, to care for each other, to create moments of grace and beauty and connection that transcend the ordinary and touch something eternal. Tommy understood this when he was 8 years old, and he has spent his life living out that understanding, creating magic wherever he goes, making wishes come true for people who have forgotten how to wish for themselves. He is my hero, my teacher, my inspiration, and I am grateful every day that I got to be his brother, that I got to witness his wish and help make it come true, that I got to learn from him what it means to live a life of purpose and meaning and love. The snow is still falling outside my window, each flake unique and beautiful and temporary, just like the moments that make up our lives. My children are calling me now, telling me the tree is ready, asking me to come see, their voices full of excitement and joy. In a few minutes, I will go to them. I will admire their work. I will help them hang the last few ornaments and plug in the lights. We will stand together in the glow of the tree, and I will tell them again about Uncle Tommy and Mrs. Chun, about the Christmas wish that changed everything, about the power of love to create magic in the world. And maybe, if I'm lucky, they will carry that story with them as they grow, as they face their own challenges and make their own choices about what kind of people they want to be. Maybe they will remember that an 8-year-old boy once made a wish for someone else, and that wish brought an entire community together, and that the magic created that night continues to ripple outward, touching lives, changing hearts, making the world a little bit better, a little bit brighter, a little bit more full of love, because that's what wishes are for, really. Not to get what we want for ourselves, but to create what others need, to bring joy where there is sorrow, to bring light where there is darkness, to bring love where there is loneliness. That's the real magic of Christmas, the real magic of life itself. We are all connected, we are all responsible for each other, and we all have the power to make wishes come true. Tommy taught me that. Mrs. Chin taught me that. That Christmas, all those years ago, taught me that. And now I am teaching to my children, hoping they will teach it to theirs, hoping the lesson will continue to spread generation after generation, creating a world where kindness is a norm, where love is a default, where we all understand that the best gifts are the ones we give others. The cookies are done now. I can smell them, that sweet, warm scent that means home and family and all the things that make life worth living. The radio is playing Christmas carols, the same songs that played in our house all those years ago. the same songs that filled Mrs. Chen's living room that magical evening. The world outside is white and cold and beautiful, and the world inside is warm and bright and full of love. This is Christmas, not the presents under the tree or the decorations on the walls or the elaborate meals we prepare. This feeling of connection and love and purpose, this understanding that we are all in this together, that we all matter, that we all have something to give and something to receive. This is what Tommy's wish taught us. This is what Mrs. Chen's life showed us. This is what that magical evening reminded us of. And so, as another Christmas approaches, as the snow falls and the lights glow and the carols play, I am filled with gratitude and hope and a deep abiding love for this life, for these people, for these moments that string together create something beautiful and meaningful and true. I am grateful for the lessons I have learned, for the love I have received, for the opportunity to pass it all forward to the next generation. I am grateful for my little brother, who asked for just one wish at Christmas, and in doing so, taught us all what wishes are really for. I am grateful for Mrs. Chen, who received that wish with grace and gratitude and showed us how to die with dignity and peace. I am grateful for my community, who came together without hesitation to create magic for someone who needed it. And I am grateful for this moment, right now, standing at my window watching the snow fall, knowing that my children are in the next room waiting for me, knowing that tomorrow we will go out and try to create a little magic for someone else, knowing that the cycle continues, the love spreads, the wishes keep coming true, because that's what we do. That's who we are. That's what Tommy taught us all those years ago when he was just 8 years old and made a wish for someone else. We are wish makers, magic creators, love spreaders. We are people who see needs and try to fill them, who see sorrow and try to bring joy, who see darkness and try to bring light. We are not perfect. We make mistakes. We fall short. We sometimes forget what matters most. But we keep trying. We keep reaching out. We keep believing that love is stronger than hate, that kindness is more powerful than cruelty, that connection is more important than division. We keep making wishes for each other, and we keep working to make those wishes come true. This is a legacy of that Christmas, the gift that keeps on giving, the lesson that never stops teaching. This is what I will carry with me for the rest of my life, what I will pass on to my children, and hope they pass on to theirs. This is a story I will tell again and again, the story when my little brother asked for just one wish at Christmas, and that wish changed everything. The story of how an 8-year-old boy saw someone suffering and decided to do something about it. The story of how a community came together to create magic for one of their own. The story of how an elderly woman received the gift of one more perfect Christmas and died happy, surrounded by love. The story of how wishes come true not through magic but through love, not through wishing but through doing, not through hoping but through acting. This is a story about Christmas, but it's also a story about life, about what it means to be human, about the connections that binds together, and the love that makes everything worthwhile. It's a story about my little brother Tommy, who taught me more about living than anyone else ever has, who showed me that age is no barrier to wisdom, that size is no barrier to courage, that we all have the power to change the world if we care enough to try. It's a story about Mrs. Chen, who lived a life of quiet kindness and left behind a legacy of love that continues to touch lives years after her death. It's a story about a neighborhood that came together and discovered what they were capable of when they worked as one. It's a story about the true meaning of Christmas, stripped of all the commercial trappings and reduced to its essential truth, love made manifest, grace made visible, hope made real. And it's a story that continues, that is still being written, that will go on being written as long as there are people who remember, who care, who are willing to make wishes for others and work to make those wishes come true. It's a story that belongs not just to me or to Tommy or to Mrs. Chen, but to all of us, to anyone who has ever loved someone, to anyone who has ever tried to make the world a little bit better, to anyone who has ever believed that kindness matters and that we are all responsible for each other. My children are calling again, more insistent now, and I can hear the laughter in their voices, the joy that comes so easily to the young, the excitement that makes Christmas magical for children everywhere. I turn away from the window, leaving the snow to fall in its silent beauty, and I walk toward the sound of their voices, toward the warmth and light of the living room, toward the tree they have decorated with such care and pride. As I walk, I think one more time about that Christmas, about Tommy's wish, about Mrs. Chen's joy, about the magic we created together. I think about how that one evening changed the trajectory of so many lives, how it set in motion a chain of events that continues to this day, how it reminded us all of what truly matters in this brief and precious life we have been given. And I am filled with gratitude, with love, with hope for the future. Because if an 8-year-old boy could change the world with one wish, if a dying woman could teach us about grace and gratitude in her final days, if a neighborhood could come together and create magic out of nothing but love and determination, then anything is possible. Anything at all. We just have to care enough to try. We just have to be willing to make wishes for others instead of only for ourselves. We just have to remember that we are all connected, that we all matter, that we all have something to give and something to receive. We just have to love each other in all the big and small ways that love can be expressed, in all the moments that make up a life, in all the choices we make about what kind of people we want to be. This is what Tommy taught me. This is what Mrs. Chen showed me. This is what that Christmas reminded me of. And this is what I will carry with me always, a light in the darkness, a warmth in the cold, a reminder that even in a world that can seem harsh and unforgiving, there is beauty, there is kindness, there is love, there is magic, if we are willing to create it. There are wishes that come true, if we are willing to work for them. There is hope, always hope. As long as there are people who care, who try, who believe that we can make the world better, one wish at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one moment of connection at a time. I reached the living room, and my children rushed to me, pulling me toward the tree, showing me what they have done, their faces bright with pride and joy. The tree is beautiful, covered in ornaments old and new, each one carrying its own story, its own memory, its own piece of our family history. The lights glow warm and steady, casting a soft radiance that fills the room, and I can smell the pine, sharp and clean and full of promise. This is my life. These are my people. This is my purpose. To love them, to teach them, to show them by example what it means to live a life of meaning and purpose and connection. To pass on the lessons I have learned, the wisdom I have gained, the love I have received. To make wishes for others and work to make those wishes come true. To create magic in a world that desperately needs it. My youngest daughter tugs on my hand, and I look down at her bright eyes and eager smile, and I see Tommy in her, that same pure heart, that same generous spirit, that same belief that the world can be good if we make it so. And I know that the legacy continues, that the story goes on, that the love spreads ever outward, touching lives we will never know, creating ripples that will extend far beyond our ability to see or measure. This is enough. This is everything. This is what Tommy's wish taught us, what Mrs. Chen's life showed us, what that magical Christmas reminded us of. Love is real. Kindness matters. We're all connected, and we all have the power to make wishes come true. The snow continues to fall outside, blanketing the world in white, making everything clean and new and full of possibility. Inside, we are warm and safe and together, surrounded by love, filled with hope, ready to face whatever comes next, ready to make more wishes, to create more magic, to spread more love, ready to live the lesson that Tommy taught us all those years ago, when he was just 8 years old and asked for just one wish at Christmas. The lesson that the best gifts are the ones we give others, that the truest magic is the magic we create together, that love is the only thing that really matters, the only thing that lasts, the only thing that makes this brief and beautiful life worth living. This is the story of when my little brother asked for just one wish at Christmas. But it's also the story of all of us, of every person who has ever loved someone, who has ever tried to make someone else happy, who has ever believed that kindness and compassion and connection are what make us human. It's a story that belongs to everyone, that speaks to something universal and eternal, that reminds us of who we are and who we can be. It's a story about Christmas, but it's really a story about love. And love, as Tommy and Mrs. Chen taught us, as that magical evening showed us, as every day since has reminded us, love is the answer to every question, the solution to every problem, the light that guides us through the darkness. Love is what makes wishes come true, what creates magic in the world, what gives meaning to our lives. Love is what my little brother gave to Mrs. Chan when he made his wish. Love is what our community gave when they came together to make that wish come true. Love is what Mrs. Chin gave back to us in her gratitude and her grace and her final words of wisdom. Love is what continues to flow through our lives, connecting us, sustaining us, reminding us that we are never alone, that we always matter, that there is always hope. And so, as I stand here with my children, looking at the tree they have decorated with such care, feeling the warmth of their small bodies press against mine, smelling the cookies and the pine and all the scents that mean Christmas, I am filled with a peace that passes understanding, a joy that transcends circumstances, a love that encompasses everything and everyone,